Okay, hi everyone. Welcome back to tutorial number 2 for exercise 2. In this exercise, we're going to take this grey model that we made in the previous video, and if I go back to my other file, we're going to, if I hide my reference images, we're going to add this wooden texture. And then in the next part of the exercise, we're going to sort of rig and pose and do other things to our model. But for now, we just want to get this nice wooden texture on our model. Okay, so I'll go back to our mannequin modeling file. So here we are. So first of all, what I've got for you are some photographic textures that I paid for from a website, and I'm going to share them just privately with the class. And I'll ask that you don't share them further because they're from a great site that I think it's worth paying for their material. But we're going to use them just in class. And basically what they are, I'll show you on my screen, is is these sort of photographic textures. So they're just JPEG files. And we're going to connect them to our model so that it starts to look like it's made out of wood. Okay, so as I mentioned in exercise 1, we have these tabs up the top of Blender. And what these tabs do, they don't really change the function of Blender, they just reconfigure the windows to something more convenient for different operations. And so now we're going to use the shading window and the UV editing, or the shading tab and the UV editing tab. So let's go into shading first, and we're going to start with the head, and I'm going to click on the head, and I'm just going to click new here in the shader editor. And that's going to bring up a new material, and in the material tab here you'll see that it's the same thing. So if I change this to blue, it changes it to blue over there. The only reason we use the editor here is that we can do more complex operations, joining different things together to build out this material. So first of all, I'll rename it. Let's call it wood. Hit enter. And then I want to navigate to where I've got these image files, which I believe is in my Dropbox. Just change the view. Where are we? Here, teaching, 3D fundamentals, Blender, what will we have here? Textures, wood, and we can just grab the first one, which is going to be called called wood color, and if we drop it in here, we have an image texture node that's automatically loaded that file. So I can just connect the color to the base color there, and immediately we'll see the wood there. It doesn't look very good though, and there's a reason for that. I'm going to add in a couple more things here. By pressing Shift A, I'm going to add in a UV map. Oh, it seems like my screencast, my key mapping is not working. I'm just going to turn that off and on again and see if that turns it back on. Yep, okay, great. Okay, so now I'm going to go Shift A and search and add in another one called mapping. And here I'm going to connect the UV here. I'll explain what this means in a moment, to the vector, and the vector to the vector. And basically what that means is we're looking for information that's going to tell Blender how to map this two-dimensional photograph onto this three-dimensional object. And if we pop over into what's called the UV editing tab, we'll see that wooden texture there now. And if I go into my material preview mode, we'll see that texture here. If I press A to select all the faces, we'll see the UV map. And the UV map, I believe is the vertical, V, the horizontal. Could be the other way around. But basically the words U and V are used here to refer to how a two-dimensional space for images is mapped onto three-dimensional objects. So obviously using X and Y would not work here because we use X and Y to refer to geometry. So we've got U and V. Now if I just grab some of these and move them, you can see what it's doing. It's changing how Blender understands where to map this photograph. So if I press Tab, you can see that basically what we've got is actually the UV map of the original cube we started with. And because we did so much modeling on it, all of the default UVs that cube had are all stuffed up. So if I add in a cube, I'll show you what this means. If I add in this cube and then go into its shading properties and I grab that wood texture, you'll see that the wood is mapped on quite well because the cube has its UVs by default, and Blender already knows what to do with them and actually match up from face to face, which is great. But on our sphere, that's not the case. Sorry, on our head. So let's delete that. Now, I'm not going to do a really detailed UV unwrapping tutorial here. I'll point you to a few. Basically, UV unwrapping, it's really useful, especially if you want to do a lot of artwork in the texture file itself, the JPEG or the PNG file. You can have that mapped onto your object and you can have a lot more control. For example, you could have a face or all sorts of things, and if you knew where the UVs were going to be mapped onto this object, you'd know exactly where to paint in Photoshop or something like that on the image file. But UV unwrapping done properly is quite time consuming, and because we're doing so many other things in this exercise, I'm just going to do some very, very basic stuff. So, okay, I can press Tab here, and if I go back to my UV editing here, when I'm in edit mode, if I've got all the faces selected and I press U for unwrap, I've got these different unwrapping options, and these are sort of automatic unwrapping options. And sometimes we just have a bit of common sense and think which one's going to be the best. So because we've sort of got a slightly round shape, I could try a sphere projection. Let's see what that looks like. And I'm going to right click on my object and also change it from shaded flat to shade smooth. And the sphere projection's not too bad. It doesn't look great up the top, but we might not see that much of the top, so that we might actually get away with. So let's leave that at the sphere projection. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply this wood material to all of the other objects of our mannequin, and we'll just one at a time go through them and maybe correct their UVs a little bit and get it looking good. Okay, so I'm going to select every part of the mannequin except for the head. Then I'll shift select the head, and so that makes the head the active object. See how it's orange, or it's yellow and the other one's orange? That means it's the active object. Then I'm going to press Control L, and that will allow me to link the materials. And once I click that, it just sort of applies the same material to all of the different objects. So if I go back into the shading menu, they're all using this wood texture, which is super convenient. Okay, so a few things I forgot. We've got all of these other texture files that we can use. I can just collapse these, make them a little bit smaller. We can use the normal map. The normal map, usually it adds kind of, it sort of adds like fake extra texture. And for rough objects, it really makes a big difference. In this case, I don't think the normal map has that much information in it. If we look at the files here, there's really only very subtle information there. So I don't think we'll actually use the normal map here. So I'll just delete that. But we might use the reflection map. So here we can pop that in and pop it into the roughness and see what we get. So yeah, look at that. We've got this kind of super shiny wood, like a polished floor. And we can connect that to our UV map. To be honest, sometimes with different websites, I'm not sure what they mean with different maps. So we can also, by control and right click, we can cut that connection. And instead of roughness, we can connect it to the specular. And maybe that's, okay, so we're not getting that strong reflection. So maybe let's keep it on the roughness there. Get that sort of shiny wood look. All right, and you can see that's affected all the other parts. All right, so next thing we can do is let's look at the neck. So the neck, if I right-click Shade Smooth, let's have a look at its UVs. I'll select it, select all the faces, and again, Blender still thinks it's a cube. But the neck is more like a cylinder. So what if we unwrap and do a cylinder projection? Ugh, hasn't done a very nice job, maybe because of the angle it's at. But how does it look? Yeah, it's all kind of messed up there. So what if we do unwrap and just do a smart UV project? What do we get? That looks a little bit better to me. Yeah, I think that looks kind of nice. So let's just keep that. Let's have a look at the torso. So I'll right click Shade It Smooth. And yeah, we've got all of that stretching from all of that extruding we did. So let's try the Smart Project. What do we get? Looks pretty good actually. It's good because we don't have any seams in obvious places. The seams are basically where Blender has to work out where to cut this into different pieces. Think about it like peeling an orange. You know, at some point, to turn a 3D object like the orange into something flat like an orange peel, you have to make cuts to lay it out. And that's exactly what UV unwrapping does. And it means that in some points you have to have these seams, and you kind of just hope to have them in places where it's not too obvious. Now with the spheres, if we press Tab and grab all the faces, we didn't really change the spheres that much. So we can probably just keep the default UVs and just sort of shade them smooth. I think we can get away with that. So I'll just right click on all of the spheres. It looks like I forgot to save it when I moved the wrists back into the correct position. So I'll just GY and bring them forwards. Okay, click on it, right click, shade them smooth, and do the same to the knees. Left click, right click, shade smooth. Well, why am I not getting my keyboard mapping? Is that... seems to keep turning itself off. Screencast keys, okay, that's better. Shade smooth, okay. So I think that's all of our spheres, shaded smooth. Did I get... oh, I forgot the waist. Shade smooth. And the hips by the look of it too. Okay, so that was nice and easy. Now let's have a look at the arms. So tab, again it thinks it's a cube. Let's try the U for unwrap, Smart UV project, shade smooth. Yeah, I think we're going to get away with that. Okay, great. Now, as I said, I am not doing proper UV unwrapping here, so I will point you to a proper UV unwrapping tutorial. And basically, if you do one of these tutorials for a few hours, you know, you'll get the point of UV unwrapping pretty quickly. It's just a sort of a slow and careful process where you lay out these different islands so that, if I go into island select here, so that, you know, they're positioned in a logical order so that the texture is wrapped well, and especially so that you can edit it well in an image editor. All right. Okay, so let's look at the hips here. I'll select all the faces. U for unwrap, Smart UV project. So that hasn't done such a good job. If I go to shade smooth, we've got a big seam at the front. So what I might do is I'm going to go into edge select mode, and I'm going to grab some edges in an inconspicuous place, maybe like here. I'm going to grab all of these edges, and if I control click here, whoop, no, it didn't work. I want to, I just want to grab that loop. Maybe I have to hide the legs for a second. So hide these and hide our leg. I'll just hide a whole bunch of stuff. So I just want to see this, and I want to grab this seam here, and I'm going to actually mark it as a seam and see if that helps the way that Blender cuts it. So once I've selected that edge loop, I'm going to right click and say mark seam. And now if I go grab all the faces and U for unwrap, Smart UV project, that's still not so good on the front. What if I unwrap with is cube projection going to get us any better? Cube projection actually is a little better, but you know, if we had more time, we'd probably start sewing these edges together so that we get the best looking result at the front. But that's certainly an improvement, okay? Because what marking the seam does is it tells Blender, okay, look, if you have to make a cut, here's a place to make it. Okay, now I'll just turn all of these back on so I can see them again, and I'll continue my way down. So Now obviously I could probably have done this before I duplicated the legs and the arms across, so I wouldn't have to do all this twice, but it really doesn't take so long. So I'll just get through this, shade it smooth, select all, U for unwrap, Smart UV project, shade smooth, same with the leg. Oop, I have to select all the faces, U for unwrap, Smart UV project, OK, then right click, shade smooth, tab for edit mode, all to select all, U for unwrap, Smart UV project, OK, shade smooth, tab for edit mode, all, U for unwrap, Smart UV project, shade smooth. Oop, I forgot to shade smooth. All, unwrap, shade smooth, edit mode, all, U for unwrap, Smart UV project, shade smooth. Okay, and get the foot here, all the faces, U for unwrap, Smart UV project, and shade smooth. And I've probably forgotten, yep, this side. So I'll grab this forearm, whoops, tab, all faces, U for unwrap, Smart UV project, shade smooth, all faces, unwrap, Smart UV project, and right click, shade smooth. Okay, have I missed anything? Nope. Oh, I have missed a hip joint somewhere. Have I hidden it? Yep, there it is. Okay, great. All right, so that's our texturing. And as I said, I will link to some, much better texturing tutorials. But I just wanted to instruct you in the absolute basics of, connecting some images, making sure that the UVs look okay. You don't always have to shade smooth. In fact, many objects should be shaded flat. It just really depends on what it is. But there we have it. There we have our mannequin, which is now textured. And in the next tutorial, we will rig the mannequin so that we can start to animate it and move it. I'm just going to save my file there, and I'll end this tutorial. Okay, thanks guys. Bye-bye.